October 1985. The turquoise waters of the Mediterranean, a haven for the wealthy and a mirror of eternal tranquility. The magnificent cruise ship, Achille Lauro, was not merely a boat, it was a floating palace with 900 dreams, 900 lives momentarily detached from earthly concerns. Imagine a golden sunset in the port of Alexandria, the scent of salt and the aroma of champagne wafting through the air. On the deck, an elderly American couple, Leon and Marilyn Klinghoffer, smiled at their lives filled with physical challenges but abundant in love. Leon, in his wheelchair, thought this journey would be their last grand adventure. However, deep in the engine room, far from the sunlight, four young men were hiding, not for a vacation, but for a war. This trip was not destined to have a happy ending. The sound of a dry gunshot in a luxurious corridor was the key to the start of a nightmare, where the red carpet of the deck became stained with blood. An hour later, leisure turned into hostage-taking. 900 people became mobile prisoners, and the Mediterranean, which just moments ago symbolized peace, transformed into a scene of a global chase. This was not merely simple piracy, it was a political declaration of war born from a humanitarian disaster. And what was their main objective? Not money, not the freedom of prisoners, but the demonstration of power at the cost of the weakest passenger's life. Leon Klinghoffer, in his wheelchair, became a symbol of the fragility of innocence in the face of terror. Now, the world had to witness how a luxurious cruise turned into one of the darkest chapters in contemporary history. Secrets would be unveiled that brought Washington, Cairo, and Rome to the brink of military conflict. Are you ready to hear how a locked cabin intertwined the fates of nations? Achille Lauro, in its history, was not just a ship but a legend. With its lavish Italian decor, this ship had transported thousands over the years. The October 1985 journey was supposed to be one of these routine routes: Genoa, Naples, Port Said, and then a long stop in the port of Ashdod, Israel. However, this stop in Ashdod held a purpose beyond tourism for four secret passengers. For members of the Palestinian Liberation Front, PLF, affiliated with the Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO, had hidden weapons and explosives in a storage area beneath the deck, planning to execute a premeditated terrorist attack in the port of Ashdod. They boarded the ship disguised as crew and ordinary passengers. But fate altered their plans. On the afternoon of October 7th, a crew member accidentally entered their cabin while they were transferring their weapons. A sudden and brief encounter, yet sufficient to compromise their operation. In a moment of panic, the terrorists realized they needed to change their plans. They could no longer wait for Ashdod, the ship had become their battlefield. With the sound of the first shot, the hostage-taking began. Passengers, initially bewildered and then in absolute terror, were gathered in the main dining hall. The terrorists, now wearing masks of rage, violently seized control of the ship. The ship's captain, Achille Lauro, was under immense pressure to change the ship's course. He was compelled to head towards the port of Tartus in Syria. In the early hours of the hostage situation, the atmosphere on board was a bizarre mix of luxury and utter horror. Passengers were forced to sleep on the floor alongside crystal chandeliers and expensive furnishings. However, the terrorists' goal was not financial theft but creating a global political shock. The group's leader, Yusuf al-Maluki, the youngest among them, demanded the release of 50 Palestinian prisoners, including Samir Kuntar, a notorious Palestinian prisoner in Israel. This demand immediately placed Israel in an inflexible position: we do not negotiate with terrorists. This deadlock marked the beginning of the subsequent critical hours, pushing the terrorists towards a frantic course of action. Among the hundreds of hostages, the Klinghoffer couple was the most vulnerable. Leon Klinghoffer, a 69-year-old Jewish-American businessman, was unable to move without his wheelchair due to illness. As negotiations completely broke down and the terrorists realized their demands would not be met, they felt the need to demonstrate their power and seriousness. They needed to take a victim. The terrorists quickly recognized that Leon Klinghoffer, due to his American and Jewish identity, as well as his physical condition, was the perfect victim to showcase their ruthlessness and power. Leon and Marilyn were separated one last time. Marilyn later recounted that Leon looked at them with a sense of pride and defiance, as if he knew what fate awaited him. The separation of Leon occurred just 1 hour before the terrorists' final surrender, a moment that revealed the terrorists were not seeking victory but rather aiming to inflict maximum pain and terror. The crime took place on October 9th. Leon Klinghoffer was taken to a secluded area near the deck. The details of those final moments remain shrouded in ambiguity and horror. What is certain is that he was shot twice in the head and chest. Then, in a brutal act that significantly escalated the crime, his body along with his wheelchair was thrown into the Mediterranean waters. Just a few hours later, the ship headed towards Port Said, and the hijackers, under pressure from the Egyptian authorities, were preparing to surrender. This murder was not only a crime but also a major strategic blunder. This act transformed the Achille Lauro case from a political hostage situation into a personal and unforgivable war crime. The United States, which had been acting cautiously until that moment, now had a clear directive: they are murderers and must be prosecuted. With the negotiations failing, Egypt intervened to preserve its dignity and prevent further bloodshed. In this mediation, a key figure entered the scene: Mohammed Zaidan, known as Abu Abbas, the leader of the PLF and the mastermind behind the operation. Abu Abbas traveled to Port Said as a mediator, but in reality, he came to cover up the crime and ensure the escape of his operatives. With the approval of the PLO, Abu Abbas ordered the terrorists to surrender. He assured them that by transferring to a safe Arab country, they would not face trial. After surrendering, the terrorists were placed under the full protection of the Egyptian government at the military airport in Port Said. In these moments, Egypt only reported the end of the hostage situation and remained silent about the death of Leon Klinghoffer. This concealment would later escalate into a major diplomatic crisis. In an effort to maintain relations with Palestinian organizations, Egypt decided to transfer the criminals to Tunisia on an Egyptian Boeing 737. In Washington, The news of Klinghoffer's death was confirmed, and Ronald Reagan's anger was uncontrollable. He ordered, "The killers must be arrested at any cost." The Pentagon and the CIA initiated a rapid intelligence operation. The U.S. Navy, with the help of top-secret surveillance, was able to intercept the flight path of the Egyptian plane carrying the terrorists and Abu Abbas. The plane was en route to Tunisia, but Tunisia, under U.S. pressure, refused to accept it. The aircraft then changed course toward Athens, but Greece also declined to accept it. In the midnight hours of October 10, four advanced F-14 Tomcat fighter jets launched from the aircraft carrier USS Saratoga in the eastern Mediterranean. American pilots, in an unprecedented and daring operation, tracked and surrounded the Egyptian Boeing 737 in international airspace. This scene was not only tactically impressive but also cinematic. American jets forced a plane carrying Egyptian officials and terrorists to comply. The Egyptian pilot, aware of the interception, after contacting Cairo, was compelled to land at the nearest available NATO base, Sigonella Air Base in Sicily, Italy. The moment the Egyptian plane touched down in Sigonella, the latent tensions between NATO allies erupted. On one side of the runway, U.S. Navy SEAL commandos, dispatched from the Saratoga for the arrest operation, took their positions. Their objective was clear: to capture the terrorists and take them back to the United States for trial. However, on the other side, elite Italian forces, the Carabinieri, and soldiers from the Italian army quickly surrounded the area. The then Prime Minister of Italy, Bettino Craxi, made a crucial decision, declaring that the terrorists had committed their crimes in international waters near Italian territory and that their trial must occur under Italian jurisdiction. This created an open military and diplomatic conflict between the two allied nations. In the darkness of Sigonella night, a breathtaking standoff occurred. American soldiers, weapons at the ready, faced Italian soldiers who had their guns aimed at them. This was a moment when the world teetered on the brink of an internal conflict within NATO. Reagan and Craxi engaged in a tense and historic phone conversation, struggling to reach an agreement. The terrorists would remain under Italian custody, but Abu Abbas, due to his diplomatic passport, had to be released and allowed to leave Italy on the Egyptian plane. This decision sent shockwaves through U.S.-Italian relations, igniting American outrage, as the mastermind behind the crime had once again slipped through the hands of justice. The four main terrorists of the Achille Lauro incident were ultimately tried in Italy and sentenced to long prison terms. However, Abu Abbas, who eventually sought refuge in Belgrade, evaded justice for years. The United States, in absentia, condemned him for orchestrating a terrorist act. The Achille Lauro saga profoundly influenced U.S. and Western anti-terrorism policies. This event became a symbol of the harsh reality that terrorism knows no borders or red lines and is willing to target even the most vulnerable and innocent victims. This incident, along with other attacks such as the bombing of the La Belle Disco in Germany, reinforced Reagan's doctrine of zero tolerance towards terrorism and laid the groundwork for subsequent retaliatory operations by the United States. The main tragedy lies in the story of Leon Klinghoffer. She dedicated her life to fighting terrorism and honoring her husband's memory. By establishing the Leon Klinghoffer Foundation, she became the voice of terror victims worldwide and urged governments until the end of her life not to allow killers to travel freely around the world. Leon Klinghoffer's body was discovered months later by a cargo ship and was laid to rest. The Achille Lauro crisis served as a historical turning point, demonstrating how a cruise ship can become the dramatic intersection of the most intense political and military conflicts between major powers and terrorist groups. The lesson we take from this bitter event is how fragile peace can be in the Mediterranean, and indeed anywhere in the world, and how the ruthlessness of a terrorist act can alter the structure of international relations overnight. The story of the Achille Lauro is more than just an incident. It is a poignant and precise slice of history that shows how geopolitical tensions can infiltrate the smallest and most personal spaces of human life. It illustrates how the fragile tranquility of a vacation can be swiftly crushed under the boots of terrorism. This story serves as a vital reminder that in the war of ideologies, it is innocent people who become the sacrifices. Leon Klinghoffer was neither a politician nor a soldier. He was simply a man who wished to spend the last moments of his life in peace with his love. However, he became an eternal symbol of terrorism victims, a symbol of the truth that no one should be targeted solely because of their identity or race. The lesson we learn from Sigonella and the Mediterranean is one of the rule of law and justice. In a world where terrorists can evade the law under diplomatic cover, it is our duty to keep these narratives alive so that others understand how fragile justice can be. The story of the Achille Lauro is not one to be forgotten, but rather a testament to human courage in the face of horror and catastrophe. If this deep, cinematic narrative filled with historical details has captivated you, it is time to ring the bell, subscribe to our channel, and share this video with anyone interested in the real and impactful stories of modern history. Let us know in the comments what aspect of this crisis affected you the most. Together, we will not allow history to be forgotten.